Grand opening, grand closing.
Hey, welcome my friends, my family, my fellow gamers. It's your only friend, these YouTube streets, Puerto77, back with you with another video. Thank you so much for checking it out. If you're new to the channel, I have a podcast every Tuesday, 60 Frames No Lag podcast. It's at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Hope you guys, come through, enjoy the conversation with the chat. And while you're here, give a like. And if this video interests you, subscribe for more content. Now let's go back to the topic right here. So we got Jaffy, the creator of God of War, one of PlayStation Santa Monica devs. This is his comment on Twitter. Wow, first Xbox, now Ubisoft. Their conference was fantastic. Much as I adore Starfield, it's cool to see the open world space adventure brought up to modern standards. And AC looks so fucking good. Hey PlayStation, here's how you compete. Open up the checkbook, buy Ubisoft. So in David Jaffy's mind, in order for PlayStation to compete with Xbox, they need to buy Ubisoft. So let's start with the first question. Who's PlayStation competing with? Like, if they don't buy Ubisoft, is now Xbox going to start dominating the console market? You see the problem with what David Jaffy is, David Jaffy is going to be one or two people, right? The first person is they purposely are pushing this agenda because they know what would actually happen with Ubisoft, right? One, they know that Ubisoft is a publisher built on being a multi-platform, publisher. They rely on putting their games on every platform. So their system, their economy, their resources, their operation procedure is all built as a multi-platform, multi-publisher on every device, right? As much as possible, right? And he knows this. And David Jaffy knows that if Sony did buy Ubisoft, nothing will really change. Their games would still be on PC and Xbox. They have to, because that's what PlayStation absorbed. It's no different than Bungie, right? Bungie is a multi-platform publisher for their game, for Destiny, whatever, to cut out Xbox, even if it's just a small percentage. And I think with Ubisoft games, Xbox does get a little decent sales. Even let's say if it's like 20%, right? Let's say 20%. Let's say at most 20%, right? That is still 20% Sony would have to eat if they don't put the future games on Xbox. So David Jaffy knows that Ubisoft would do to PlayStation what ABK did to Xbox, which would put them in a financial burden where you have to keep the games on every platform, maybe even put it in more platforms so you can make up the cost of buying the studio. So he knows this. So that's type person one. The other type person is the same person, but they don't realize they would put PlayStation in that type of burden. They're just oblivious to the business side of it. They think that this will be a great thing and not realize what would actually happen. So it's either you know or you don't know. David Jaffy knows. He's been in the business long enough. He knows exactly that if Sony were to buy Ubisoft or EA, they will be put in the position that the games have to be made everywhere, because that's what they actually bought. They bought a publisher that was built for that. And then to cut out platforms, right? So you're going to spend this money. Think about it. The value of Ubisoft is based off them making games everywhere. So now you buy them, and now you're going to cut out platforms. And maybe since, these are big AAA games, you will make them fall under the tempo strategy, right? You're gonna delay the game release on PC? No. If Sony were to buy Ubisoft, at this point, you would be a fool to think Sony will make any of those games exclusives. Let's just all be honest. They're not gonna do that, right? It's a waste of time, right? Sony buying any major publisher, Take-Two, EA, Ubisoft, Capcom, it's just a waste of damn time. And at this point, I don't think they would even buy Square Enix, because you already seen Square Enix. They're always talking about almost every game didn't meet expectation. Sony's not going to buy them either, just to keep the games exclusive, even if it's timed. That's just not happening. Sony's not, maybe like 10 years ago, but this Sony that we have now, they're not interested in that. They're focusing on investors that want to maximize profit and profit margins, and they want to use as much platforms or whatever, and that could include other systems. Not, let's just say, absolute exclusives to the PlayStation is not their priority. At best, PlayStation gets timed exclusives. at best, even including their own. But PC and other platforms in some way is going to be involved. And if you buy a company like Ubisoft and there's like even a little bit of sales that comes from Xbox, they're not going to let go of that. They're not. Just how they didn't do it for Destiny, and even Marathon is coming, right? Marathon's going to Xbox. Marathon is going to, and Marathon has no established revenue from any platform. So if there's any game that they could have made exclusive, or at least just PlayStation and PC, it would be Marathon, because Marathon does not have an established fan base at all. But they're still going to release it on Xbox, regardless of how little that is. So you best believe that Ubisoft games, all of them, will still go on Xbox day and day. So why would we have Sony be responsible for that? You see, to truly make PlayStation compete, it's the same formula that made them compete with the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and PlayStation 4. You focus on your first party and you invest in that. The fraction of the cost of buying Ubisoft, they could put that towards their first party studios and help them develop multiple teams. Because right now, most of the teams, they're only able to handle one AAA project every 5 years. And that is, I think, is the biggest problem for PlayStation at this point. They didn't invest enough into their studios so they can release multiple games per generation. In my opinion, every studio that Sony has should be able to produce 3 games per generation. And it doesn't even have to be 3 big AAA games. It could be 1 AAA game, 1 big 5-6 year project, and 2 AA games, which is about 3 years of worth of work, right? That's more than enough, and that's perfect, right? Each studio will have their big AAA game, right? That's 5-6 years biggest blockbuster, and then you get 2 more games, right? That's budgeted anywhere between $40 to $60. It comes out in 3 years, so you got your 3 games. Boom. That's more than enough. You have a nice portfolio of titles and a good consistent cadence from the first party publishers, developers that you enjoy, right? They're always cooking up something. Look at Insomniac. Insomniac is literally the blueprint. They literally showed Sony the blueprint. You got your Miles Morales, which was actually a $50 game, right? The $70 one is the one that included the Spider-Man remaster. But if you bought the standalone Miles Morales, that's it. It was only $50. So that shows you it wasn't a $70, AAA game, AAA big budget game. It was a decent budget. They sold it $50 and it is phenomenal, right? Then they released Ratchet and Clank, right? Which is a good sized AAA game, right? But I wouldn't think it's as big as Spider-Man 2, right? They released Spider-Man 2, which is a big AAA game, and they're about to release Wolverine this gen. So think about what they did this gen. Miles Morales, Ratchet and Clank, Spider-Man 2, and Wolverine. That's 4 games. 4 games. You know what I'm saying? All I'm saying, the rest of the studio should do at least 3. But to only release 1 game per generation, like for example, Sony Ben's last game was Days Gone, and that game came out in 2019 on the PS4, and they have not done anything since. Right now, I'm sure they're working. I'm sure they're cooking. Yes, I know they're not. They don't have a day off. They're not just sitting in the beaches of Cancun doing nothing. They are developing a game. But because that studio can only handle 1 game, whenever that 1 game comes out, and it could be fantastic, but if it comes out in 2025, that's it. You're not gonna see another game from them. Right? At best, if you do, it's a cross-gen game that you can play on your PS5 and your PlayStation 6. So it will be like a PlayStation 6 launch title that you can play on your PS5. That's the best you're gonna get from Sony Ben. Okay? Sucker Punch, Ghost of Tsushima 2. Probably be another 2025 game, maybe 2026. And that's all you're gonna get from Sucker Punch. Another game after that might be a launch PlayStation 6 game that's cross-gen with PlayStation 5. You see what I'm saying? Each of these developers, right now, each of these developers should already be releasing. If they didn't release their first game at launch, they should already been released their first game, right? Even if it's just a AA title, right? And then their AAA, and then finish off the gen with another AA. 3 games. That's it. That's all I'm asking, 3 games. But in order for them to come out with 3 games, you had to put in the money into those studios so you can hire the people form them up, strategize into teams, kind of like what Insomniac has. Insomniac has 2 studios on each coast. They have one studio in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, and they have another studio in Santa Monica. And they both work in tandem. They both work on their projects, and that's why you see a lot of content coming out from Insomniac. They have a great system of handling their teams, releasing that. Sony should have saw that, and they should have put in the money to Sony Band, to Blue Point Studios, right? I think Naughty Dog's kind of there, right? I think the live service game is what kind of screwed them up, but I think they have enough for multiple games. Just live service set them back, but they're pretty much prepared for that, right? Santa Monica, I don't think they're prepared for that. I think Santa Monica is built for like one AAA game, but then they have these smaller teams to support other games, you know, stuff like that. Or maybe they might be too, because there's talk about Cory Barlog making his own game. So we might get 2 games out of Sony Santa Monica, right? One cross-gen, which is God of War, and then hopefully a new IP for Santa Monica. So they might be close, right? But when you look at studios across the board, every PlayStation studio should be capable of producing 3 games. Now, of course, some studios is designed for one thing, like San Diego Studios. They're designed for baseball, which is MLB. Got it. That's all we're going to get out of them, because they have to have a baseball game ready every single year. You know, and now that they're also multi-plat, they make games for Switch and Xbox. They don't got the bandwidth to make a new IP. Rumor has it that they are doing one. I don't know. I think that's just wishful thinking, but for the most part, it's understandable. And then you got Prolifically Digital that is focused on racing. Okay, got it. GT, that's the exception. Everyone else should be pushing to have the capability to make multiple games, various budgets, and that's how you get a nice steady cadence of first-party games. That is how you invest. That is how you make PlayStation better. That is how you get more people to come onto PlayStation. You know, the thing that made people come to PlayStation 1, the thing that made people come to PlayStation 2, the very thing that made PlayStation 3 come with the comeback. Remember, PlayStation 3 made one of the best comebacks that we never seen in gaming history. No brand, no console brand absolutely failed at launch and for the first couple of years and made a comeback. PlayStation 3 was the only one to ever do that. To have such a huge failure at launch and just consistently get bashed, right? Completely get bashed. And to get to the point that where Activision at the time, Bobby Kotick, when he was the CEO, right, at the time, right, he said that if sales do not improve on the PlayStation 3, they may just completely stop support on the platform. Imagine no more Call of Duty at all because ABK feels your platform's not selling enough. That's how bad things got for the PlayStation 3. And Sony made a comeback. They made a comeback so big that they surpassed Xbox 360 sales. They sold more consoles than Xbox 360. And 360 had a year head start, and they had the majority of the lion's share of sales for like the first 3 years. Everybody was buying 360. Sony made a comeback. How did they make a comeback? They didn't make a comeback investing on other platforms. They didn't say, oh, maybe we could put our games on the Wii and people will notice PlayStation 3 exists. No, they went flood. They opened the floodgates of so many games. I mean, there were so many games being released on the PlayStation 3, and they just kept throwing. And whatever game attracted somebody saw a game, whether it's Mag, Resistance, Uncharted, Demon Souls, when it was first invested into. Like, they saw something across all this stuff and thinking, oh man, I'm gonna get a PlayStation 3. That game looks cool, right? And some of this game wasn't big blockbusters. They didn't sell 10 million, but they sold enough to attract somebody. Man, I really like Warhawk. Man, I like Resistance. Oh, snap, God of War 3. Oh, snap, Uncharted 2. And they just kept going. Little Big Planet. Yep, they were just vast. It was just a lot of games, and all the studios were firing on cylinders, and they just kept pumping games, right? That's what they need to do. Okay? This past year in 2023, we really only had one big game from Sony's first party, which was Spider-Man 2. For the whole year 2023, right? That was the big hoopla. If you want your PlayStation 5 to sell and you want more people to pay attention, you got to put just more games out. That's all you got to do. Clearly, your number one weapon in this is your first party. That's your number one weapon to show that you're different compared to your other platform providers, right? That's your number one weapon, right? That's your number one way to advertise all these, first party greatness and stuff like that, right? So when people see, Sony Computer Entertainment, those little white bars that pop up, people want to see that, right? But the thing is, people need to see that more often. They need to see that more often with more titles, right? We need to see more games from Sony Ben. One game from Sony Ben, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. That's absolutely crazy. That's absolutely insane. Now we're finally going to get Ghost of Tsushima. I mean, it hasn't been officially announced, but we would imagine that's the game that's coming. And that's their first new big game in the gen. It's 2024. You're telling me 2025, 2026 is when these guys are now showing up? You can't be doing that, Sony. Right? So what David Jaffy did is just foolishness. In my opinion, he's being slick. Right? And anybody agrees with this, you guys don't have no idea what will happen. If Sony buys Ubisoft, any of these things, they're still going to be made for Xbox. So what will be the point? We need to see Sony invest in their own studios to make them bigger, to make more games for PlayStation. That's what we need to see. We need to see that. We need to see a strategy where the studios get more, where it's not just one game every 5 years. These studios should have multiple teams. And it's embarrassing that Sony, knowing that their studios have, grew in prominence and said, like everybody's all about the Sony first party studios, but you don't put in the money to make more games. It would be the equivalent of an airline industry buying this new triple, the Boeing 787, the biggest blockbuster plane, right? And they only use it once. No. That plane's value is you gotta keep putting it up in the air. It's gonna land, load people on it, fly to the next destination. Land, load people on it, fly to the next destination. You gotta treat your developers the same way. They release a game, hey, we gotta see another game in 3 years. You can't go 7 years doing nothing, right? But they can't do that with one team, right? You got to scope them out where they have multiple teams. So while the one big team's doing this big AAA, that's a 4, 5, 6, 7 year project. You got two other teams. They're doing a 3-year project. This year's doing a 3-year project. This one comes out maybe a year or two later. This comes out. Between both of them in a 5, 6 year span, they release their games. Then a year later, the big AAA comes out. You see what I'm saying? They got to plan that out. These studios need to be robust and they need to be built for that. But I don't see the investment in these studios doing that. It's just not. Sony's just trying to find ways to squeeze blood out of a stone instead of support and strengthen the very strength that they have, which is asinine. Once they saw in PlayStation 4 that their first party has gained a new level of respect, right, and expectation, they should have invested in that one. They should have put more investment and be like, all right, we gotta make sure these studios can do more for the next generation and keep investing so that way we get more and more out of these studios. But it doesn't seem like they're doing that, right, Ava? But this right here, this nonsense right here that David Jaffy's saying, this is just nonsense. What the hell is Ubisoft gonna do? Sony buys Ubisoft, great. So now Sony's responsible for these games on Xbox and PC and PlayStation all day one. What the hell does that do for any of us? How is that beneficial to PlayStation? I mean, to PlayStation gamers. We get the games anyway. At this point, just buying publishers is just stupid. A fraction of that money will go into the studios to allow them to make more games. That's what we need to advocate. More games. Don't advocate to go on Twitter and talk shit. Ha! Assassin's Creed's now a first party IP. Who gives a shit? It's still gonna be on other platforms. We gain nothing from that. We don't gain a goddamn thing other than Twitter talking points, to which we're like this small in the whole gaming world. If you're a PlayStation gamer and you truly love enjoying PlayStation gamers, you want more PlayStation creativity and more games from them. And the only way we're gonna get more games from them if Sony opens up the checkbook to make their own studios bigger. That's it. Now open up a checkbook to buy IPs, multi-plat IPs, that in the end, they're still going to make the game for other platforms. That's absolutely silly. But anyway, you let me know what you think. Hit up the comment section. Once again, Puerto77, your only friend, these YouTube streets. Again, hit up the comment section. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Please subscribe. Stick around. And again, 60 frames, no lag. Every Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. Come through for the chat. Just check it out at least once and see how it goes. So that way you can enjoy with the crew. All right. Anyway, you guys have a great weekend. You take care. Peace.
Grand opening, grand closing.